A scarred Labrador's resilience sparks a thrilling battle against cruelty, transforming a hospital and healing broken hearts. Welcome to Paws Verve. Subscribe for more heartwarming stories of dogs and puppies. The golden fur of Cooper the Labrador. Retriever shimmered faintly under the sterile lights of Richmond Veterinary Hospital, despite the scars that crisscrossed his trembling body, a testament to a brutal past in an illegal dog-fighting ring in rural Virginia. His three-legged frame hunched slightly in the corner of the examination room, his missing right hind leg a stark reminder of the cruelty he had endured, yet his warm brown eyes held a quiet, unyielding spark of resilience that seemed to defy the pain etched into his flesh. Rescued 3 years ago from a blood-soaked pit where he was left for dead, Cooper had been a fighter not by choice, but by survival, his body bearing the marks of countless battles fought under the jeers of heartless spectators. The scars ran deep, one slicing across his muzzle, another curling around his shoulder, but they did not define him. Instead, they framed a soul of extraordinary gentleness, a spirit that refused to be broken. At the hospital, he was no stranger. His monthly checkups a necessity to manage the lingering effects of his injuries, yet each visit seemed to carry the weight of judgment from those who saw only a damaged animal unworthy of their time. Cooper's journey had begun in darkness, starved, beaten, and forced to fight until his leg was mangled beyond repair. Yet the shelter volunteers who found him saw something remarkable in his gaze, a flicker of trust that persisted despite humanity's betrayal. They named him Cooper for his cooperative nature, his willingness to lean into a kind touch even when his body screamed in pain, and it was this quality that drew people to him like moths to a flame. Children at the local hospital where he now served as a therapy dog would bury their faces in his fur, their small hands tracing his scars, as if they could feel the strength beneath them, while Cooper sat patiently, his tail thumping softly against the floor. His presence was a balm to those who knew suffering, a silent promise that survival was possible, that love could bloom in the ashes of cruelty. On this particular morning, as he waited in the examination room, Cooper's ears flicked at the sound of approaching footsteps, his body tensing not out of fear, but from an instinct honed in the fighting pits where every noise could mean danger. Yet his eyes remained soft, searching the doorway for Lily Carter, the veterinary technician who had become his anchor in this sterile world, a woman whose gentle hands and quiet voice had earned his unwavering trust. Lily had been with him since the beginning, her compassion a stark contrast to the indifference of others at the hospital, and it was she who had brought him here today, for what should have been a routine visit. But something felt different, the air heavy with an unspoken tension, as if the room itself knew that this day would mark a turning point. Cooper's story was not just one of survival, but of transformation, a testament to the power of resilience and the capacity for love to heal even the deepest wounds. His warm brown eyes seemed to hold a wisdom beyond his years, a quiet assurance that no matter what came next, he would face it with the same courage that had carried him through the darkest nights. As the door creaked open, Cooper lifted his head, his scarred muzzle tilting slightly, his gaze locking onto the figure entering the room, ready to meet whatever this moment would bring. Unlike the pristine purebreds that pranced through the hospital's gleaming lobby, Cooper carried no pedigree, no lineage to boast of, yet his presence commanded a different kind of respect, one earned through endurance and an unyielding capacity for forgiveness. The volunteers who had nursed him back to health often spoke of his early days when he would flinch at sudden movements, yet still wag his tail at the sight of a kind face, a paradox of fear and hope that defined his character. His therapy work had become legendary in Richmond's medical community, where nurses recounted stories of children who spoke their first words in months while stroking his fur, or cancer patients who found solace in his steady gaze during their darkest hours. Cooper's scars told a story of violence, but his actions spoke of peace, a duality that made him unforgettable to those who took the time to see beyond his broken body. In the examination room, he shifted slightly, his three-legged stance a graceful adaptation to a life altered by cruelty, yet his movements were fluid, almost defiant in their ease, as if to say that loss could not diminish him. The hospital's cold tiles beneath his paws were a far cry from the muddy pits of his past, but they carried their own kind of hostility in the form of whispered judgments and sidelong glances from staff who valued profit over compassion. Cooper seemed oblivious to this, his focus fixed on the present moment, on the possibility of a gentle hand or a familiar voice. His bond with Lily was particularly profound, forged in the quiet moments after his rescue, when she would sit by his kennel, reading softly to him as he learned to trust again. That bond had carried them through countless hospital visits, each one a small victory in Cooper's ongoing battle to reclaim his life. As he waited now, his tail gave a tentative wag, a small gesture of hope that belied the weight of his past and the uncertainty of the present. The examination room, with its sharp scent of antiseptic and gleaming instruments, felt like a battlefield of a different kind, where Cooper's worth would once again be tested not by his strength, but by the biases of those meant to heal him. Yet he remained steadfast, his brown eyes scanning the room with a quiet intelligence that seemed to see through the superficial to the heart of things. His story was a beacon for those who knew it, a reminder that beauty could emerge from brokenness, that love could triumph over pain, and that even the most wounded among us could carry a light that others desperately needed. Cooper's presence in that moment was a quiet challenge to the world around him, a call to look beyond the scars and see the soul that had survived and thrived against all odds. The door to the examination room swung open with a cold metallic creak, and Dr. Eleanor Hayes strode in her pristine white coat, a stark contrast to the malice in her eyes as she fixed her gaze on Cooper, the three-legged Labrador retriever, cowering in the corner of Richmond Veterinary Hospital. Her lips curled into a sneer as she clutched a can of soda, her manicured fingers tapping the aluminum with deliberate menace, while Derek Lawson, the veterinary assistant, lounged against the counter, his smartphone already raised to capture the scene, his smirk as sharp as the scalpel on the tray beside him. Cooper's golden fur, still damp from nervous sweat, glistened under the fluorescent lights, his scars standing out like battle maps on his trembling body, yet his warm brown eyes flickered with a desperate hope that someone might see him as more than a broken thing. Dr. Hayes tilted her head, her voice dripping with mockery as she said, "This worthless mutt takes up space that could be better used for a real patient," and without hesitation, she tipped the soda can, letting the sticky brown liquid cascade over Cooper's head, soaking his scarred muzzle and dripping into the empty space where his right hind leg should have been. The Labrador flinched his ears, flattening against his skull, but he did not growl or snap, only pressed himself further into the corner, his body language a silent plea for the cruelty to stop. Derek laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the sterile walls as he zoomed in on Cooper's humiliated form, narrating for his social media followers, "Look at this rescue fail, another charity case wasting our time," while Chloe Bennett, the receptionist, hovered in the doorway, her fingers flying across her phone as she typed out a post-damaged goods, getting what it deserves, #VetLife. The soda pooled on the floor, mingling with Cooper's quiet tremors, each drop a small betrayal of the trust he had so carefully rebuilt since his rescue from the dog-fighting pits of rural Virginia. Lily Carter, the veterinary technician who had brought him in, stood frozen just outside the room, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold, her hand clutching her phone, where she had already sent a discreet text to Cooper's owner, James Dalton, warning him of the unfolding horror. The air in the room was thick with cruelty, a tangible weight that seemed to press down on Cooper's scarred shoulders, yet his eyes never left Lily's face, searching for the familiar kindness that had anchored him through countless visits. "Doctor." Hayes tossed the empty can onto the floor with a clatter, her laughter sharp and cutting as she remarked, "Maybe this will teach people to stop dumping their broken animals on us," while Derek angled his phone for a better shot, his voice gleeful as he added, "Let's see how many likes we get for this one." Chloe's phone buzzed with notifications, her post already gaining traction among the hospital's cliquish staff, who thrived on mocking the animals they deemed unworthy. Yet Lily's calm exterior hid a storm of fury as she whispered to herself, 10 minutes until everything changes," her words a quiet vow that this act of cruelty would not go unanswered. Cooper's past flashed through Lily's mind, the images of his rescue 3 years ago, when he was found barely alive, his leg so mangled it required amputation, his body a canvas of wounds, yet even then he had wagged his tail at the sight of a gentle hand. That resilience had made him a hero to the children he visited as a therapy dog, their small fingers tracing his scars as they found courage in his survival. But now, in this sterile room, that resilience was being mocked, his dignity stripped away. For the amusement of those who saw him as less than the purebreds that filled their appointment books, Dr. Hayes ran a nail along one of Cooper's deepest scars. Her voice cold as she said, "Animals like this are a drain on resources, better off euthanized than dragging out their miserable lives," while Derek nodded in agreement, his phone still recording. As he quipped, "Maybe we should start a series on these rejects." The cruelty was not new. Richmond Veterinary Hospital had long operated under an unspoken hierarchy where animals were valued by their pedigree and their owner's wealth. But this moment felt different, a deliberate escalation that crossed a line even Lily had not anticipated. Cooper's trembling grew more pronounced, the soda stinging his eyes, yet he remained still, his training as a therapy dog, overriding his instinct to flee, a heartbreaking testament to his trust in humans, even when they failed him. Lily's fingers tightened around her phone, her mind racing as she calculated the minutes until James Dalton's arrival. Knowing that his influence as a tech billionaire and the hospital's silent stakeholder could turn this moment into a reckoning. The room seemed to shrink around Cooper, the walls closing in as Dr. Hayes, Derek and Chloe reveled in their power, their laughter a stark contrast to the Labrador's silent endurance. Yet even in his humiliation, Cooper's eyes held a flicker of something unbroken, a spark that had survived the pits, the starvation, the beatings, and now this deliberate act of degradation. Lily stepped forward, her voice steady as she said, "I need to grab Cooper's medication records from my car," but her words were a cover, a calculated move to alert James without arousing suspicion. Dr. Hayes waved her off with a dismissive hand, her focus still on Cooper, as she said, "Take your time, we're just having a little fun with your pet project." The word fun sliced through Lily like a blade, but she held her composure, knowing that every second brought James closer to the hospital, his presence a force that could dismantle the toxic culture that had festered here for years. As Lily slipped out, Cooper's gaze followed her, a silent plea, not for rescue, but for understanding, a look that said he could endure this, as he had endured so much before, if only someone would see him for who he was. The soda continued to drip from his fur, each drop a small wound to his dignity, yet his tail gave the faintest twitch, a gesture of hope that seemed impossible in the face of such malice. The examination room, once a place of healing, had become a stage for cruelty, but Cooper's presence in that moment was a quiet defiance, a reminder that even the most wounded could carry a strength that no act of cruelty could extinguish. Lily Carter stood just outside the examination room, her heart a tight knot of fury and grief, as she watched Dr. Eleanor Hayes pour the last drops of soda over Cooper's trembling golden fur, the Labrador Retriever's scarred body shrinking further into the corner of Richmond Veterinary Hospital. Her fingers gripped her phone so tightly, her knuckles whitened the text she had sent to James Dalton, Cooper's owner, still glowing on the screen, a quiet cry for justice that carried the weight of months of silent observation. Lily's role as a veterinary technician was a cover, a carefully maintained facade that allowed her to move through the hospital's gleaming corridors unnoticed while she documented the systemic cruelty that festered beneath its polished surface. For nearly a year she had watched Dr. Hayes, Derek Lawson and Chloe Bennett mock and neglect rescue animals like Cooper, prioritizing purebreds and wealthy clients with a callousness that turned her stomach, yet she had bided her time collecting evidence with the precision of a detective, knowing that one wrong move could unravel everything. As Derek's laughter rang out his phone, capturing Cooper's humiliation for his social media followers, Lily's mind flashed to the first time she met the Labrador 3 years ago, his body a patchwork of wounds, his eyes holding a trust that seemed impossible after the horrors of the dogfighting ring. That trust had forged a bond between them, a silent pact that she would protect him no matter the cost, and now as she stood in the doorway, her calm exterior masked a storm of resolve. She whispered to herself, 10 minutes until everything changes, her voice steady despite the rage that burned in her chest, a promise to Cooper that this moment of cruelty would be the catalyst for change. Dr. Hayes tossed the empty soda can onto the floor, her sneer a blade that cut through the room as she said, This mutt's a walking argument for why we shouldn't bother with rescues, while Chloe typed furiously on her phone, her post already racking up likes from colleagues who shared her disdain. Lily's eyes never left Cooper, his warm brown gaze locking onto hers through the haze of soda and shame, a silent plea that she understood, not as fear, but as faith in her ability to make this right. She had seen that look before in the shelter. When he first arrived, barely able to stand yet wagging his tail at her touch, and later in the children's hospital, where he comforted young patients with a gentleness that belied his scars. Lily's role at the hospital was no accident. She was the director of rehabilitation at James Dalton's Private Rescue Foundation, a position she kept secret to monitor the care provided to animals like Cooper, who were too often dismissed as worthless. Her quiet competence and unassuming demeanor made her invisible to the hospital's toxic clique, but it also gave her access to their careless words, their internal messages, their billing records, all of which she had meticulously compiled into a damning dossier. As Derek zoomed in on Cooper's trembling form, narrating for his followers, "Let's get this viral," Lily took a step back, her mind racing through the logistics of James's imminent arrival, knowing that his status as a tech billionaire and the hospital's silent stakeholder would turn this incident into a reckoning. She typed a second text to James, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "They're filming it, don't let them delete the evidence," a warning that the video Derek was so gleefully recording would be their undoing. "Doctor." Hayes's voice cut through the room sharp and mocking, as she ran a nail along Cooper's deepest scar, saying, "Animals like this are why we need triage, not charity," while Chloe giggled, adding maybe we should charge extra for cleaning up their messes. The cruelty was a performance, each participant feeding off the other's malice, yet Lily saw it for what it was, a symptom of a deeper rot that had taken root in the hospital's culture, a hierarchy that valued profit over compassion and pedigree over potential. Cooper's stillness in the face of this onslaught was heartbreaking, his training as a therapy dog, keeping him from reacting with the aggression his tormentors might have expected. Instead, he endured, his body a testament to the resilience that had carried him through the fighting pits. Lily's mind flickered to the countless other animals who had suffered under this regime, the rescues given generic medications, the delays in treatment, the mocking comments recorded in her notes, all building toward this moment when she could finally act. She stepped back into the hallway, her voice calm as she called out, "I need to grab Cooper's medication records from my car," a calculated lie that gave her an excuse to slip away without arousing suspicion. Dr. Hayes waved her off her attention, still fixed on Cooper as she said, "Make it quick. We're not done with this one yet," her words laced with a cruelty that made Lily's skin crawl. As she moved toward the exit, Lily's thoughts were with Cooper, his scarred golden fur now matted with soda, his eyes still searching for her, a reminder of why she had taken on this role in the first place. She had grown up around animals, her childhood filled with strays she nursed back to health, and it was that love that had driven her to veterinary medicine, only to find herself in a hospital where compassion was a rarity. Her work with James's foundation had given her purpose, channeling her skills into rehabilitating animals like Cooper, but it was her covert mission here that had tested her resolve, forcing her to witness cruelty without reacting until the time was right. As she reached the parking lot, her phone buzzed with a reply from James on my way 5 minutes out, a message that sent a surge of hope through her veins. She glanced back at the hospital, its gleaming facade a lie that hid the ugliness within, and she knew that Cooper's suffering today would not be in vain. His story was one of survival, of finding light in the darkest places, and Lily was determined to ensure that this moment of cruelty would spark a transformation not just for him, but for every animal who had been dismissed as unworthy. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening as she prepared to return to the examination room, knowing that in just a few minutes the balance of power would shift, and Cooper's quiet strength would become the catalyst for justice. 3 years before the cruel soda incident at Richmond Veterinary Hospital, Cooper, the Labrador Retriever, lay in a blood-soaked pit in rural Virginia, his golden fur matted with dirt and wounds, his right hind leg so mangled it hung uselessly, a grim relic of the illegal dog-fighting ring that had nearly claimed his life. Rescued by a team of volunteers who raided the operation under cover of darkness, Cooper was a shadow, Of the vibrant dog he might have been, his body starved to the point of collapse, his scars a map of relentless cruelty, yet his warm brown eyes held a flicker of defiance, a spark that refused to be extinguished even as he teetered on the edge of death. The volunteers found him chained in a corner, surrounded by the chaos of barking dogs and confiscated weapons, his whimpers barely audible over the din. But when one of them knelt beside him, offering a gentle hand, he managed a faint wag of his tail, a gesture that broke their hearts with its impossible hope. They named him Cooper for his cooperative spirit, his willingness to trust despite the horrors he had endured, and that moment marked the beginning of a journey from the brink of oblivion to a life of purpose. At the shelter, his condition was dire, the veterinarians debating whether euthanasia might be kinder, given the extent of his injuries, but something in his gaze, a quiet insistence on living, convinced them to try. His leg was amputated the surgery, a grueling ordeal for a body so weakened, yet Cooper endured waking from anesthesia to lick the hand of the nurse who stayed by his side. The shelter became his sanctuary, a place where volunteers like Lily Carter poured their hearts into his recovery, teaching him to navigate the world on three legs and coaxing him to eat when despair threatened to overwhelm him. His scars told a story of violence, one that ran across his muzzle and curled around his shoulder, but they also marked his survival, each healed wound a testament to his resilience. As he grew stronger, Cooper's gentle nature emerged a stark contrast to the aggression his captors had tried to instill. He would nuzzle against volunteers seeking comfort, and even in his weakest moments, he seemed to sense their emotions, offering a soft nudge to those who wept over his pain. His transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Within months he was walking with a grace that belied his missing limb, his golden fur beginning to shine again, as if reflecting the light he carried within. Lily, who had been there from the start, saw in him a rare kind of courage, the kind that didn't roar but persisted quietly through every setback, and it was she who first suggested he might have a calling beyond the shelter. Cooper's debut as a therapy dog came by chance when a volunteer brought him to a children's hospital in Richmond, hoping his presence might cheer a young patient battling leukemia. The effect was immediate. The girl who had been silent for weeks reached out to stroke his scars, her fingers lingering on the ridges as if drawing strength from them, and Cooper sat patiently, his warm brown eyes locked on hers, his tail thumping softly against the floor. Word of his impact spread, and soon he was a regular visitor, his three-legged gait a familiar sight in the hospital's halls, where children would light up at his approach, their laughter a stark contrast to the sterile beeping of machines. Nurses began to call him the miracle dog, noting how his visits seemed to spark hope in even the most despondent patients. A boy with burn scars who smiled for the first time in months, a teenager with cancer who whispered her fears to him as he rested, his head in her lap. Cooper's ability to connect went beyond instinct. It was as if he understood suffering on a level that transcended species, his own pain giving him a unique empathy that touched everyone he met. Back at the shelter, his progress was a source of pride, but also a reminder of the countless others who never made it out of the fighting rings, and Lily often sat with him in the quiet hours, her voice soft as she read to him, promising that his survival would mean something greater. His scars, which might have marked him as fearsome to some, became badges of honor, symbols of a spirit that refused to break, and when he was adopted by James Dalton, a reclusive billionaire who had lost his son to illness, Cooper's story took on a new dimension. James had visited the shelter on a whim, his own life shrouded in grief, but Cooper's unwavering trust pierced through his darkness, forging a bond that gave them both a reason to keep going. Together they built a routine of healing Cooper's therapy work expanding to include veterans and seniors, while James quietly funded the shelter that had saved him. Yet the shadow of Cooper's past lingered in the form of his monthly hospital visits, where the staff's disdain for rescue animals cast a pall over his resilience. As Lily stood outside the examination room now, her mind heavy with the image of soda dripping down Cooper's fur, she saw his entire journey in a single moment, the pits, the shelter, the hospital wards, and now this cruel betrayal. His story was one of triumph over unimaginable odds, a reminder that even the most broken could shine. And as she waited for James to arrive, she knew that Cooper's quiet strength would be the spark that ignited change. His warm brown eyes had seen the worst of humanity, yet still sought the best, and in that seeking he had become a beacon for all who knew him, a living testament to the power of love to heal what cruelty had sought to destroy. James Dalton stood in the shadow of his grief, a tech billionaire, whose name was synonymous with innovation, yet whose heart had been hollowed out by the loss of his son, Ethan, 5 years ago, a tragedy that left him a stranger to the world he had once shaped with his boundless ambition. At 46, he was a figure of enigma, his wealth immeasurable, his face rarely seen outside the boardrooms of Dalton Technologies, where he had built an empire from a single idea coded in a college dorm. Yet the man who stepped into the Richmond animal shelter 3 years ago was not the titan of industry, but a broken soul searching for a reason to endure another day. His son's death from leukemia had stripped away the veneer of invincibility that wealth afforded, leaving James adrift in a sea of despair, his days measured by the weight of memories he could not escape. The shelter visit was meant to be a final act of charity, a quiet donation before he retreated from a life that no longer held meaning. But fate had other plans in the form of Cooper, a 3-legged Labrador retriever, whose scarred golden fur and warm brown eyes met James's gaze with a recognition that transcended words. Cooper, freshly rescued from a dogfighting ring in rural Virginia, was a mirror of James's own wounds, his body a testament to survival against impossible odds, yet his gentle nudge against James's hand carried a spark of hope that pierced the billionaire's darkness. In that moment, James saw not just a dog, but a kindred spirit, a creature who had faced the abyss and chosen to live. And it was this unspoken bond that compelled him to adopt Cooper, postponing the plans he had made for his own end. Their connection grew in the quiet moments at James's sprawling Richmond estate, where Cooper's 3-legged gait echoed through the halls, once filled with Ethan's laughter, the dog's presence a balm to a wound that had never healed. James threw himself into Cooper's care, funding the best veterinarians and therapists to ensure his recovery, while Cooper in turn offered a loyalty that asked for nothing but presence. His warm brown eyes seeming to say that survival was enough, that love could be enough. Together, they carved out a new purpose. Cooper's therapy work at children's hospitals became James's lifeline as he watched the dog bring smiles to faces that mirrored his son's in their fragility. The billionaire who had once shunned the spotlight found himself lingering at these visits, not for recognition, but for the quiet joy of seeing Cooper's gentle nature touch lives in ways his wealth never could. He established a private rescue foundation under Lily Carter's direction, channeling millions into saving animals like Cooper, while keeping his involvement a closely guarded secret, his name absent from the foundation's public records, to preserve the anonymity that shielded his grief. Yet Cooper's monthly visits to Richmond Veterinary Hospital exposed them to a different reality, a place where the staff's disdain for rescue animals cast a shadow over the dog's resilience, a cruelty James had been unaware of until Lily's urgent text about the soda incident shattered his illusions. As he sped toward the hospital now, his sleek black Tesla cutting through the city, his mind replayed the moment he first met Cooper. The dog's scarred muzzle pressed against his palm, a silent vow that they would face the world together. James's wealth had built empires, but it was Cooper who had rebuilt him, teaching him that purpose could be found in the smallest acts of trust, in the courage to keep going despite unbearable loss. His attorneys and security team sat silently in the car, their presence a reminder of the power he wielded as the hospital's majority shareholder through a web of holding companies. Yet it was not power that drove him now, but a fierce protective love for the dog who had saved him. Cooper's therapy work had shown James the depth of the dog's impact. A girl who spoke her first words in months while stroking his fur, a veteran who found solace in his steady gaze. And it was this legacy that James was determined to protect. The hospital's gleaming facade loomed ahead, a monument to excellence that hid a toxic culture James had unknowingly enabled through his absence, and as he pulled into the reserved parking space, his steel-grey eyes hardened with resolve. Lily's text had been clear. They were filming Cooper's humiliation, a deliberate act of cruelty that would not go unanswered, and James knew that his arrival would shift the balance of power in ways the hospital's staff could not anticipate. His grief had once made him a ghost, but Cooper had given him a reason to fight, and now that fight was for every animal dismissed as worthless, for every soul deemed unworthy of compassion. As he stepped out of the car, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw emotion in his heart, he thought of Ethan, whose love for animals had been boundless, and of Cooper, whose scars were a testament to the same resilience his son had shown until the end. James's wealth could move mountains, but it was his love for Cooper that would move hearts of force that would demand justice, not just for one dog, but for all those who had suffered under the hospital's callous hierarchy. The hospital doors slid open before him, the hum of activity inside a stark contrast to the storm he was about to unleash, and in that moment, James Dalton was no longer just a billionaire, but a man reborn through the unwavering trust of a scarred Labrador retriever. Beneath the polished veneer of Richmond Veterinary Hospital, a toxic culture thrived, its gleaming corridors and state-of-the-art equipment masking a hierarchy that valued profit over compassion and pedigree over potential, a stark betrayal of the oath to heal all creatures entrusted to its care. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, the chief veterinarian at 49, had sculpted this environment with surgical precision, her icy demeanor and unspoken policy of prioritizing purebreds and wealthy clients, setting the tone for a staff that followed her lead with a mix of fear and ambition. Her blonde hair always pulled into a severe bun, her white coat immaculate, she moved through the hospital like a queen, her word law, and her disdain for rescue animals like Cooper, the three-legged Labrador retriever, a doctrine that permeated every level of the facility. Derek Lawson, the 33-year-old veterinary assistant, embodied this cruelty. With a performative zeal, his muscular frame and designer scrubs, a backdrop for the smartphone he wielded like a weapon, capturing moments of animal suffering for his social media followers, who lapped up his mockery of rescue fails. Chloe Bennett, the 27-year-old receptionist, completed the trio, her manicured nails tapping out derogatory posts that catalogued animals by their perceived worth, her mental ledger of clients' addresses and attire dictating the warmth of her smile. Together they had turned the hospital into a kingdom where animals like Cooper, scarred and three-legged, were dismissed as damaged goods unworthy of the time and resources lavished on champion retrievers or pampered Pomeranians. The hospital's reputation as Virginia's premier animal care facility drew wealthy clients from across the state, their purebreds paraded through the lobby like trophies, while rescue animals waited in corners, their owners often treated with barely concealed contempt. This hierarchy was not accidental, but a deliberate system Dr. Hayes had cultivated over years. Her belief that resources were finite and should be allocated to valuable animals, a twisted interpretation of triage that justified neglect and cruelty. Staff who dared to challenge this culture were sidelined or pushed out their compassion, seen as weakness in a world where profit margins trumped empathy. Derek's social media presence was a cornerstone of this toxicity, his posts mocking animals. Like Cooper, with hashtags like #SurvVetLife and #CharityCase, racking up thousands of likes from a community that saw humor in suffering, his videos of distressed animals labeled as hilarious meltdowns, normalizing a disdain that seeped into every interaction. Chloe's role was subtler, but no less damaging, her posts and messages, reinforcing the narrative that rescue animals were a burden, her quick judgments of clients' worth, ensuring that only the elite received the hospital's full attention. The waiting room was a microcosm of this divide, pristine purebreds, lounging on cushioned seats, while rescues like Cooper were relegated to the edges, their owners enduring whispers of pity or discomfort from those who saw scars as a mark of inferiority. Lily Carter had witnessed this for nearly a year, her role as a veterinary technician, a cover for her true mission as director of James Dalton's Private Rescue Foundation, documenting every instance of neglect, every mocking comment, every delay in treatment that favored a wealthy client's pet over a rescue. She had seen Cooper endure this environment, his monthly visits met with barely concealed sighs from staff who viewed his care as a waste of time, his three-legged gait drawing stares that ranged from curiosity to disgust. The hospital's internal messages, which Lily had access to, revealed a pattern of billing fraud, where rescue organizations were charged premium rates for substandard care, and complaints from owners of non-purebreds were systematically buried to protect the hospital's sterling reputation. Dr. Hayes's influence extended beyond the hospital. Her connections to the state veterinary board through her brother-in-law gave her a sense of invincibility, a shield that emboldened her cruelty and ensured that whistleblowers faced professional ruin. Yet this culture was not without its cracks. A few staff members, like Jennifer, a kind-hearted nurse, whispered their unease to Lily, their fear of retaliation keeping them silent, but their compassion a faint hope that change was possible. The soda incident with Cooper was not an anomaly but the culmination of months of normalized cruelty, a moment where Dr. Hayes, Derek and Chloe felt untouchable, their laughter echoing through the examination room as they humiliated a dog whose only crime was surviving a past they could not comprehend. Cooper's presence in that room, his golden fur soaked with soda, his warm brown eyes searching for Lily, was a silent indictment of the system that had failed him, a system that saw his scars as a liability rather than a testament to his strength. Lily's documentation painted a damning picture. 47 cases of delayed care for rescues, generic medications substituted for recommended treatments, and a wait time for non-purebreds 3 times longer than for premium clients, all underpinned by a culture that celebrated cruelty as a badge of superiority. As James Dalton's Tesla sped toward the hospital, Lily knew that the evidence she had gathered would be the key to dismantling this hierarchy, exposing the rot that Dr. Hayes had nurtured under the guise of excellence. The hospital's gleaming facade was a lie, a monument to a compassion that existed only in its marketing materials, and as Cooper endured his humiliation, Lily's resolve hardened her quiet presence in the doorway, a promise that this toxic culture would not survive the day. The staff's casual cruelty had thrived in the absence of accountability, but James's arrival would bring a reckoning, one that would force the hospital to confront the cost of its priorities and the value of the animals it had so callously dismissed. Lily Carter stood in the shadowed hallway of Richmond Veterinary Hospital, her heart a steady drumbeat of resolve as she clutched her phone, the text to James Dalton glowing like a beacon of hope, while Cooper's humiliated form lingered in her mind, his golden fur dripping with soda, his warm brown eyes pleading for her to act. As a veterinary technician, her presence in the hospital was unremarkable, her quiet competence blending seamlessly into the bustle of appointments and surgeries. But beneath this facade, she was the director of rehabilitation at James Dalton's Private Rescue Foundation, a covert operative tasked with exposing the hospital's toxic culture that mocked and neglected animals like Cooper. For nearly a year she had moved through the gleaming corridors, her unassuming demeanor a shield that allowed her to observe the cruelty of Dr. Eleanor Hayes, Derek Lawson, and Chloe Bennett, without drawing their suspicion, her notebook filling with meticulous records of every slight, every act of neglect, every instance where a rescue animal was dismissed as unworthy. Her role was born of necessity, when James, a reclusive billionaire whose life Cooper had saved, sought to ensure that no animal suffered, as his dog had Lily's background in veterinary medicine, and her lifelong love for strays made her the perfect candidate to infiltrate the hospital. She presented herself as Cooper's handler, a low-level tech, who brought him for monthly checkups, never hinting at her connection to one of Richmond's most enigmatic philanthropists, whose foundation funded the rehabilitation of countless rescues. Lily's mission was twofold: to monitor Cooper's care, ensuring his physical and emotional needs were met, and to gather evidence of the hospital's systemic bias against animals deemed less valuable, a task that required her to swallow her outrage as she witnessed daily acts of cruelty. Her dossier was a damning archive: 47 documented cases of delayed treatments for rescues, generic medications substituted for premium ones, and billing fraud that charged rescue organizations exorbitant rates for substandard care, all underscored by a culture that celebrated mockery as a rite of passage. She had screenshots of Derek's social media posts, his videos of distressed animals labeled as comedy gold, and Chloe's internal messages joking about damaged goods clogging the schedule, while Dr. Hayes's own emails revealed her directive to prioritize purebreds, a policy that ensured animals like Cooper waited hours for attention that was often cursory at best. Lily's heart had broken 1,000 times over these months, Each instance of neglect, a wound she carried alongside Cooper's own scars, yet she remained steadfast, her calm exterior, a mask that hid a fierce determination to bring justice. Her bond with Cooper was the anchor that kept her grounded, forged in the early days of his recovery, when she sat by his kennel reading softly to him as he learned to trust again, his gentle nudge against her hand, a reminder of why she endured the hospital's toxicity. As a child, Lily had rescued countless animals from the streets of her small Virginia town, her bedroom a makeshift hospital for injured strays, and it was this compassion that drove her to veterinary school, only to find herself in a profession where profit often trumped empathy. Joining James's foundation had given her purpose, but her undercover role at the hospital tested her like nothing else, forcing her to witness cruelty without reacting, to smile at Derek's crude jokes and nod at Chloe's dismissive comments, all while compiling the evidence that would one day dismantle their kingdom. The soda incident was the breaking point, a moment of such brazen cruelty that Lily knew the time for silence was over. Her text to James, a call to arms that would bring the billionaire's formidable resources to bear. As she stood outside the examination room now, her mind replayed the countless times she had guided Cooper through the hospital's lobby, his three-legged gait drawing stares of pity or disdain, her hand steady on his leash as she whispered reassurances that he was more than the scars they saw. Her role required secrecy, but it also demanded courage, the courage to believe that change was possible, that the hospital could be reclaimed from the grip of Dr. Hayes's hierarchy. Lily's evidence included testimonials from former staff who had been driven out for questioning the status quo, their whispered confessions to her in coffee shops, a lifeline that kept her from despair. And as she waited for James's arrival, she felt the weight of their trust alongside Cooper's. Her phone buzzed with James's reply 5 minutes out, a promise that sent a surge of adrenaline through her veins as she prepared to return to the examination room. Her lie about fetching medication records, a strategic move to buy time without alerting Dr. Hayes. The hospital's culture had thrived on the assumption that no one would challenge it, Dr. Hayes's connections to the State Veterinary Board, a shield that emboldened her cruelty. But Lily knew that James's influence as the hospital's majority shareholder through his holding companies would pierce that shield, exposing the rot within. Her role was not just to document, but to protect, to ensure that Cooper's resilience, his capacity to love despite his past, was honored rather than mocked. As she moved toward the examination room, her steps measured, her heart swelled with the memory of Cooper's therapy work, the children who found solace in his presence, the veterans who saw their own survival in his scars. Lily's mission was for them as much as for Cooper, a fight to reclaim the hospital's soul, to make it a place where every animal was valued, not for their pedigree, but for their inherent worth. The door loomed ahead, the muffled sound of Derek's laughter, a reminder of the battle she was about to ignite. And in that moment, Lily Carter was not just a technician, but a warrior for the voiceless. Her quiet strength, a mirror of the dog she had sworn to protect. James Dalton's sleek black Tesla screeched into the reserved parking space outside Richmond Veterinary Hospital, his steel-gray eyes blazing with a fury tempered by the quiet resolve that had rebuilt his life through Cooper's unwavering trust. And as he stepped out flanked by 2 attorneys and a pair of broad-shouldered security personnel, the air seemed to crackle with the weight of an imminent reckoning. Inside the examination room, Dr. Eleanor Hayes stood with the empty soda can still in her hand, her sneer faltering as Lily Carter re-entered, her calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos she had just unleashed with her text to James, while Cooper, the 3-legged Labrador retriever, trembled in the corner, his golden fur matted with soda, his warm brown eyes fixed on Lily as if she were his only lifeline. Derek Lawson lowered his smartphone, his smug grin fading as the door swung open, revealing James's towering presence, his tailored suit and commanding aura filling the room with an authority that dwarfed Dr. Hayes's self-assured arrogance. Chloe Bennett froze in the doorway, her phone slipping from her fingers as she registered the billionaire's identity, her earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of his gaze. James knelt beside Cooper, ignoring the sticky floor, his hand gentle. on the dog's scarred head, as Cooper's tail gave a tentative wag, his trembling easing at the touch of the man who had saved him from despair. "What happened here?" James asked, his voice low but laced with a controlled fury that sent a shiver through the room, his eyes locking onto Lily, who met his gaze evenly. "They poured soda on him for amusement, sir, while filming it," Lily replied, her tone steady despite the rage simmering beneath her words, her months of documented evidence, now a weapon in this moment of truth. James rose slowly, his hand never leaving Cooper's head. As he turned to Dr. Hayes, his expression unreadable, yet devastating in its intensity. "Is this true, doctor?" he asked, his voice a blade that cut through her defenses. "A simple yes or no will suffice." Dr. Hayes's professional mask cracked, her lips parting in a stammer, as she said it was an accident. A misunderstanding, but James interrupted, his tone unchanged. "Had I not been Cooper's owner, would that have made your actions acceptable?" The attorneys stepped forward, one a sharp-featured woman with silver-streaked hair who spoke with clinical precision. "Mr. Lawson, deleting the video you recorded constitutes obstruction, but our technical team will recover it when we confiscate your device as part of our investigation." Derek's face drained of color, his phone now a liability, as he stammered, "You can't. I do that." But James's mild reply silenced him. "As the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Medical Group, which owns this facility, I have the authority to examine company-related communications on personal devices," a revelation that sent a ripple of shock through the room. Dr. Hayes's eyes widened. "Pinnacle is owned by a private group," she protested, but James's response was calm. "Hartman Ventures is one of my holding companies. Dr. Hayes, my portfolio includes veterinary care networks chosen for their reputation for excellence and compassion," his emphasis on the last word a subtle but unmistakable rebuke. Chloe, who had reappeared clutching a tablet, tried to interject, "Ms. Bennett." James acknowledged, turning slightly. "Perhaps you'd like to explain why you posted derogatory comments about my dog on social media," his words stripping away her last shred of composure as she stammered incoherently. Lily stood silently, her role as observer, now complete her dossier of evidence, a silent partner in this confrontation. As James continued, "You've made a grave mistake. This dog is not just a patient, but the reason I'm standing here today, and in less than 10 minutes, you'll understand the consequences of your actions." Dr. Hayes tried to regain control, her voice rising. "There's no need to escalate this, Mr. Dalton. We can discuss this reasonably," but James's response was unrelenting. "It's too late, you've been notified, and the evidence of your misconduct, including the video you thought deleted, will be reviewed by the board." The tension was palpable. Derek frantically wiping the examination table, Chloe retreating to the hallway as Dr. Hayes paced, her mind racing for excuses that crumbled under James's unwavering stare. Lily's voice broke the silence. 8 minutes, she said, checking her watch. "You'll want Cooper cleaned up before the board arrives," her calm, a maddening contrast to the panic now gripping the room. James nodded to Lily. "Please take Cooper to the car. My team will ensure his needs are met." And as Lily gently led the Labrador out, his three-legged gait steady. Despite the ordeal, James turned back to the trio, his voice softening, but no less resolute. "I was scheduled to announce a $50 million donation today for a new rehabilitation wing for rescue animals, a project that would have made this hospital the premier facility for traumatized pets. But your actions have jeopardized that plan." Dr. Hayes made a strangled sound, her career flashing before her eyes, as Derek and Chloe stood frozen, their faces masks of horror. James's attorneys produced a thick folder. "We have compiled evidence of discriminatory practices, billing fraud, and systematic neglect of rescue animals, all documented by Ms. Carter over the past year," the male attorney said, his tone clinical as he listed witness statements and internal communications. Dr. Hayes's defiance flickered. "You can't do this. I have a contract. I'll sue for wrongful termination." But James's cold smile silenced her. "I look forward to presenting our evidence in court, where the media can dissect how this hospital betrayed its mission." The confrontation was a turning point, a moment where the hospital's toxic culture faced the full force of a man whose love for his dog had given him a purpose beyond wealth, and as James stood there, his hand still warm from Cooper's touch, he knew this was only the beginning of a fight to restore compassion to a place that had lost its way. 6 months after the soda incident that shook Richmond Veterinary Hospital to its core, the facility stood reborn as Hope Haven Animal Center, its once sterile parking lot, now a vibrant healing garden where accessible paths wound through blooming. Dogwoods and benches invited animals and their humans to rest, a testament to a transformation sparked by the quiet resilience of Cooper, the three-legged Labrador Retriever. The hospital's toxic culture, once ruled by Dr. Eleanor Hayes's hierarchy of pedigree and profit, had crumbled under the weight of James Dalton's evidence and resolve, replaced by a mission to honor every animal's inherent worth. A shift embodied in the new Max Dalton Rehabilitation Wing, a $50 million beacon of second chances, funded by the billionaire whose life Cooper had saved. Lily Carter, now clinical director, moved through the facility with quiet authority, her year of covert documentation having paved the way for this new era where rescue animals like Cooper received the same care as the wealthiest clients' purebreds. Her first act ensuring every current case was reviewed for equity, a promise kept to the dog, whose warm brown eyes had trusted her through the darkest moments. The grand opening ceremony unfolded on a crisp spring morning, the air alive with the scent of flowers and the hum of anticipation as media vans lined the street and dignitaries, including the governor, mingled with staff and volunteers, all gathered to celebrate a hospital reborn. Cooper, sporting a sleek prosthetic leg that enhanced his graceful three-legged gait, sat beside James, now dressed in casual slacks and a rolled-up shirt, a far cry from the austere billionaire who had confronted Dr. Hayes, his presence radiating a warmth that mirrored the dog's own. The crowd's attention shifted as James introduced unlikely heroes Derek Lawson, once the mocking veterinary assistant, now stepped forward as director of community outreach, his cocky demeanor replaced by a humbled sincerity earned through months of volunteering at city shelters, cleaning kennels and walking dogs without recognition. Derek's redemption had been arduous after his termination. He spiraled into self-pity until a late-night scroll through his old social media posts forced him to confront the cruelty he had celebrated. His apology to James, a turning point that led to a chance to rebuild through education programs that taught thousands of schoolchildren about animal welfare. Similarly, Chloe Bennett, once the receptionist who posted derogatory comments, now coordinated the volunteer program connecting rescue animals with vulnerable populations, seniors in assisted living, children in hospitals, and veterans with PTSD. Her journey marked by tearful remorse and a coffee shop apology to Lily, who saw in her a spark worth salvaging. Chloe's work had already touched lives, a photo of Cooper comforting a mute child in a cancer ward, a stark reminder of the dog she had once mocked, now a symbol of her own transformation. Dr. Eleanor Hayes's path was the most unexpected. Her designer clothes and imperious ergon. She appeared at the ceremony in a simple grey dress, her hair streaked with grey, her face lined with the weight of accountability as she carried a potted dawn redwood, a symbol of her commitment to amends. Having surrendered her veterinary license voluntarily, she had spent months working with the National Veterinary Ethics Committee, developing training programs on unconscious bias in animal care, and speaking at veterinary schools about how personal trauma her son's attack by a rescue dog had poisoned her judgment. Her speech was raw, unsparing, as she admitted, "There is no undoing the harm I caused, but I can ensure my mistakes teach others," taking full responsibility for the culture she fostered, and offering a report that audited her past cases to prevent future failures. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Cooper rose, his prosthetic leg gleaming, and approached Dr. Hayes, pressing his scarred head against her hand, a gesture of forgiveness that brought tears to her eyes and ripples of emotion through the audience, a moment that crystallized the power of second chances. James returned to the podium, his voice steady as he spoke of transformation, not just of buildings but of hearts, emphasizing that redemption is possible when we confront our failures with courage, a message underscored by the animals paraded before. The crowd, a one-eyed cat, now a hospice companion, a greyhound with a wheelchair serving as a reading buddy, each a testament to the center's new ethos. The hospital's reforms were sweeping all patient prioritization, now based on medical need and oversight committee, ensuring transparency and mandatory training for staff on the needs of traumatized animals, a legacy of Lily's evidence and James's vision. Derek and Chloe's stories were not outliers, but part of a broader shift where staff who had followed the old protocols were given a chance to recommit those with moral courage, like Nurse Jennifer elevated to leadership roles. Dr. Hayes's tree planted in the healing garden became a symbol of this new beginning, its young branches reaching skyward as a reminder that even the deepest wounds could give way to growth. As the ceremony concluded, Cooper's tail thumped softly, his presence a quiet anchor. For the humans who had rallied around him, his scars no longer marks of shame, but badges of a resilience that had changed an institution. The transformation of Hope Haven was a ripple effect, born from a moment of cruelty, now a beacon of hope that drew the community together, children petting Cooper, volunteers, signing up dignitaries, pledging support, all united by the belief that every life deserved compassion, a belief Cooper had embodied from the moment he wagged his tail in a blood-soaked pit. Cooper's legacy unfurled like a quiet miracle on the sunlit grounds of Hope Haven Animal Center, the renamed Richmond Veterinary Hospital, where the Max Dalton Rehabilitation Wing stood as a monument to second chances, its opening ceremony a celebration of a Labrador retriever whose scarred golden fur and warm brown eyes had transformed not just a hospital but countless lives touched by his resilience. 6 months after the soda incident that exposed the facility's toxic culture, Cooper now moved with a graceful ease, his new prosthetic leg gleaming as he sat beside James Dalton, the billionaire whose grief had been softened by the dog's unwavering trust, his presence a living testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. The crowd gathered under a clear spring sky, children, volunteers, and dignitaries alike, drawn to the healing garden where Dr. Eleanor Hayes's dawn redwood sapling took root, a symbol of redemption planted by the woman whose cruelty had unwittingly sparked this revolution. James took the podium, his voice carrying a warmth that belied his once reclusive nature as he shared the news that had stunned the medical community. Cooper's blood work from that fateful day revealed a unique antibody with remarkable activity against pediatric cancer, a discovery that had launched clinical trials at Richmond Children's Hospital, where Cooper already served as a therapy dog. The symmetry was profound. A dog once deemed worthless by Dr. Hayes now held the potential to save lives, his survival through the horrors of a dog-fighting ring yielding a gift that could change the future of medicine. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers mingling with the soft thump of Cooper's tail as he seemed to sense the moment's weight, his warm brown eyes scanning the faces with a wisdom that transcended species. Lily Carter, now clinical director, stood nearby, her quiet pride, a reflection of the year she had spent documenting the hospital's failures, a mission that had culminated in this new era where every animal was treated with equal care, her reforms, ensuring that rescue animals like Cooper received the same attention as the wealthiest clients' pets. The trials named the Cooper Protocol were set to begin the following month, with ethical, non-invasive methods that prioritized the dog's well-being, a commitment James had insisted upon, his hand resting on Cooper's head as he spoke of the dog's journey from a blood-soaked pit to this moment of hope. Cooper's therapy work had already touched countless lives, a mute girl who found her voice while stroking his scars, a veteran who saw his own survival in the dog's three-legged gait, and now his biological legacy promised to extend that impact to children battling the same disease that had taken James's son Ethan. The rehabilitation wing was more than a building. It was a promise of compassion, its state-of-the-art facilities designed for traumatized animals with sensory rooms and specialized therapies that honored their resilience, a vision funded by James's $50 million donation and guided by Lily's expertise. Staff like Nurse Jennifer, who had always shown kindness to Cooper, now led training sessions on ethical care, their moral courage a cornerstone of the center's new ethos, while Derek Lawson and Chloe Bennett, once complicit in the hospital's cruelty, had found redemption through community outreach and volunteer programs, their transformations a mirror of the institution's own. Dr. Hayes's presence at the ceremony, her quiet work with veterinary ethics committees, had ripples of its own, her cautionary tale inspiring reforms across the state, ensuring that personal biases no longer tainted animal care. As James invited Cooper to cut the ceremonial ribbon, The Labrador activated the cutter with a gentle paw, his prosthetic leg a symbol of adaptation and strength. The crowd's applause thundering as the ribbon fell, revealing the wing's entrance adorned with a plaque that read in honor of Cooper, resilience, redemption, and love. The event was not just a celebration, but a reaffirmation of the center's mission, that no animal was just a dog or cat, but a being capable of suffering and joy, deserving of dignity, regardless of pedigree or past. Cooper's legacy extended beyond the hospital walls, his story spreading through media coverage that highlighted not just the antibody discovery, but the human transformations it had catalyzed. Derek, teaching children to value all animals, Chloe pairing rescues with seniors, and veterans Dr. Hayes confronting her trauma to prevent others from following her path. The garden became a gathering place where a child in a wheelchair approached Cooper, her hesitant hand finding his scarred head, her smile blooming as he rested his muzzle in her lap, a moment that echoed the countless connections he had forged. James watched from a distance, his heart full as he saw Ethan's spirit in the bond between the wounded child and the healing dog, a reminder that scars could become badges of honor rather than marks of shame. Lily joined him, her eyes misty as she reflected on Cooper's journey from the shelter to this moment, her role as his protector, now a legacy of systemic change that would outlive them all. The trials held promise, but Cooper's true gift was his presence, his ability to inspire forgiveness in those who had wronged him and courage in those who faced their own battles, his warm brown eyes, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt broken. As the sun climbed higher, casting the wing's shadow across the garden, Cooper rose to greet another child, his tail wagging with a joy that belied his past, his quiet strength a reminder that the most wounded often carried the greatest gifts. Hope Haven stood as a testament to this truth, its mission a ripple effect that would touch lives far beyond Richmond, a legacy born from a moment of cruelty, transformed through love and commitment into a movement for compassion that would endure for generations.